Well, we've got a lot to cover, and Mr. Seitz is a busy man, so let's get started. Shane, welcome to the MedChat podcast.
I'm so excited to be at MedChat podcast.
Well,
I can't believe you made this choice to invite me, but we all make bad choices.
You were cheap, free actually.
I brought the beer.
You brought the beer, yeah.
Yep.
So this is a spirited discussion on healthcare.
It's 8 a.m. on a Thursday.
It is not. It is 4:43, just in case anybody doesn't know that Shane's kidding. So what are we drinking today? We've got a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, handcrafted ale.
Yeah.
From Chico, California. Probably the best pale ale of pale ales.
I agree. Love Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Loved it forever.
Loved it forever.
This is like one of the original craft breweries. And they weren't even a craft brewery back then.
I believe I discovered this as a freshman in high school, which is why it took me 7 years to get out of high school.
I didn't drink beer until I moved to Colorado 20 plus years ago. I never really liked beer.
Well, you're a rule follower, and so on your 21st birthday was your first beer, and that's good.
Yeah,
you're setting a good example.
I think that's a great story. I'll stick with that story.
All right. So we're going to get into some things. We'll talk a little bit more about your background, even though I read it in the intro. But let's get personal here.
Okay.
Books that you're reading right now, I do this on every podcast, or books that you have recently read that you would recommend?
Well, you probably don't know this, but I can't read. So there aren't any books that I've read.
Actually, you're in healthcare real estate, so that would make sense.
Actually, to be honest, I don't really read books that often. I don't have a lot of time to read books. I find books fascinating, but I don't get into them as well as I probably should. I spend a lot of time reading articles. So I'm a big article reader. I love reading analyst reports for our competitors, believe it or not. So if you find me reading something, it's probably that, or it's something that I enjoy on the side, which is home renovation projects and learning about some new thing. So there's a magazine I read all the time called Fine Home Building.
What's the latest article that you've read that has inspired you?
I was actually reading about seismic retrofits for residential houses.
We had a lot of earthquakes here.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
In Denver.
And also, actually, the other one that I've been reading quite a bit is energy efficiency. And I'm kind of a nut about energy efficiency. So like the house, you've been to my house. Yeah. The house that we built is fully solar.
One of your many houses.
Yeah, yes. True. Fully solar. And we put a heat pump system in. If I would have waited.
Did you do the battery thing?
We did not do the batteries yet, but it's designed to take batteries.
All right.
I don't think the battery technology is quite there yet. But everything in that house is runs off of electric. I should have waited 3 years until the infrastructure bill.
Wait, what about your heat? Electric? Oh, God.
All electric heat.
Gas bill's insane right now.
Yep. All electric heat. All electric hot water.
Okay.
The only gas I have in that house is the cooktop on the stove, and the gas fireplace as a backup heat source if I lose electrical service for some reason.
All right. And then the other question that I ask is under $100, a material piece of something that you've purchased in the last 30 days that has been awesome.
Yeah. So again, because I'm frugal, I don't spend a lot of things, but actually these earbuds, believe it or not. So everybody buys the AirPods. These are some cheapo thing I got at Best Buy. They're like $30.
Okay.
They work just as well as AirPods.
Yeah.
And when you lose them, you're not upset that you lost $30 AirPods or earpods.
That's a great purchase.
And I've only lost one pair. And in fact, the pair that I lost because I bought them with my American Express Platinum card, they gave me the money back.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Interesting. I should do that.
Yeah.
Well, for the $700 fee that they charge for that, they ought to do something like that.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta use that. You gotta use the benefits.
I know. I need to. I'm
not
good at reading the small print. You like to read brochures and shit like that. You probably actually read the terms and conditions.
I do know all the rules. I do know all the rules. I think, the other thing to make it, you said I own all the houses I own. I mean, I do own a bunch of rental properties. And so I'm currently in the process of renovating my most current acquisition. And I just bought some multi-tool blades, which are phenomenal for those of you that like to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate that insight into your day-to-day life and your frugality. But I read your bio before we started here, but give us a straight from the horse's mouth about your experience in healthcare real estate, a real quick kind of rehash of what I just read.
Yeah, sure. I fell into healthcare real estate. I didn't plan. I went to college thinking I was going to work in marketing, fell into real estate, did residential low-income housing property management, did Section 42, Section 8, voucher-based, project-based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which at the time was the most segregated city in the country, which I think it still might be. And I grew up in a small town of 900 people in rural Wisconsin, so it was a fascinating industry to me and something new that I'd never experienced. And real estate just kind of resonated, that you could buy a piece of real estate, get a mortgage, have somebody pay rent, and that would pay your mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did it right, you'd make a little bit of a spread. If you built that up and you were kind of handy, you could actually make a living at that. So that's actually how I fell into real estate. And my plan was to stay in that business, to learn a couple facets. I wanted to learn how to buy real estate, how to sell real estate, how to manage real estate, how to finance real estate, and how to build real estate. And so I was currently managing the real estate. And so I set out on a course in my career to learn each of those other aspects. And so each job I took as my career progressed taught me something like that. So my first job in healthcare real estate was actually with Hammis Company. So prior to them having the Hammis Fund, and they still have this company, Hammis Company, it was a project management company focused on healthcare real estate, really helping hospitals and health systems grow their ambulatory network, look at where their hospitals needed to be placed to capture that patient base. And so just really learned healthcare before I learned real estate from that side. And that's what really propelled me into healthcare real estate. And from there, my career progressed into a guy that I met, actually one of my two mentors, Mark Engstrom, who was the CIO at HTA before he retired, got me in, and he hired me for my first acquisition job for a local group here in town called Bro Real Estate. Mm-hmm. And our capital partner was NHP, publicly traded REIT out of Newport Beach, California. And I did acquisitions for them for a couple of years. And then NHP came calling and said, hey, come be our acquisitions guy. So in 2008, became the acquisitions guy, and we got bought in 2011 by Ventas. I left in 2018, got sucked right back in 2019, and here I am at Ventas for a lot of years.
So you started as a slumlord. You're still a slumlord.
Still a slumlord.
In your side job. Yep. You're a side hustle, but the Ventas is the complete opposite of a slumlord.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Ventas, and for those of our listeners who have been in a cave for the last 10 years. But tell us a little bit about Ventas, and then talk to us about like what you're doing there, how you're identifying properties in kind of a broad brush sort of way. Like, what do you look to buy?
Yep. Yeah. So Ventas, publicly traded REIT, S&P 500 company. We have grown tremendously since the inception of the company. We're actually spun out of a company called Vencor, which was an operator of healthcare real estate. They spun out Ventas. Vencor got into some trouble from an operating standpoint, and they declared bankruptcy. Our CEO, Chairwoman Deb Cafaro at the time, said, hey, we're not going to lose these properties. We're not going to lose anything. So she took some pretty drastic moves to shore up Ventas, pretty smart. And what she did, and came out of that, and Vencor it was Kindred Healthcare. Mm. So from that, we stayed in business. Ventas stayed in business. She said, we're never going to be in one asset type. We're never going to have one tenant. We're going to diversify. So that's what she went on doing. So she started to grow that company, grow out of just the Kindred side of the business, started buying seniors housing, started buying medical office buildings. We've evolved into buying hospitals. We've evolved into buying life science facilities. We've actually even created a core fund vehicle. So my role at Ventas is I'm a senior investment officer. Sounds exciting, probably more exciting than what it actually is. But I'm tasked with going out and finding 40% of our business, which is medical office, life science, hospitals. And we do some behavioral health as well. So as we look at those various assets, each one of those buckets is different in what we're looking for. So medical office, you've been in this space forever. In fact, we met each other. I was trying to think back. Was it 2013?
Probably. 12 or 13, yeah.
And it was a building in Kansas City, Kansas. St. Luke's was the tenant.
Yep.
I flew out there, looked at it. I think he sold it for a 6.25 or 6.5 cap. Something like that.
Pay that all day right now. Well, maybe not right now, but
yeah, it's still probably
there, right?
Today. Yeah, I'd be a little
campus
tight.
Adjacent. I said it was on campus.
Yep, it was totally campus adjacent. It was. You did a great job brokering that one. But I think in the medical office side, that's what we're looking for. We want that relationship with that hospital and health system.
So why healthcare real estate? I mean, that's your business. It's not like you're a multifaceted where they're doing industrial and multifamily and self-storage. You're focused on healthcare real estate and different continuums. So senior housing, behavioral health, medical office, life science. So it's all intertwined a little bit. Maybe life science is a little bit of the outlier of that family. But why healthcare real estate and why medical office buildings?
Yeah. So
Let's just say that you don't work for Ventas. You're an investor.
Yeah.
Give me that.
Yeah.
Give me that view.
So I would actually say that the life science side of the business actually fits in quite well with the thesis as to why we invest in all those asset types. What I love about it is the aging demographics and the need of everyone needing healthcare, right? So if you're a medical office, if you're life science, if you're seniors housing, whatever it is, there's always demand, there's always need. People continue to unfortunately get sick. Drugs need to be created. So that leads to the life science side, the academic medical research center. We partner with a lot of universities and health systems to grow those innovation districts around the country. It spurs new ideas, creates that innovation in the healthcare side. So what we love about healthcare and what I love about healthcare from an investor standpoint is there's always going to be demand. However awful that is, we're going to continue to age. We're going to continue to get sick. When you tear your ACL, you got to get it fixed, whether the market's good or the market's bad. Your ACL doesn't care if the S&P 500 is up or if it's down. It's still got to be fixed.
Yep. And one of the guests I had on another podcast, physician, we talked a little bit. We didn't get too deep into it, but about the headwinds that hospital systems are facing right now. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the biggest driver of healthcare is the hospital systems. Obviously, you've got physician groups and that sort of thing, but the bulk of our portfolio, I'm imagining the bulk of your portfolio is hospital systems and hospital system credit. And I think S&P in 2020 or 2019 had hospital systems and hospital facilities as the lowest risk. In 2020, it bumped up a little bit. In 2021, it came back down. And now in 2022, 2023, they're saying that they might be one of the higher risks for default because of FTEs and the lack of enough, that's full-time employees, to go around, doctor burnout, nurse burnout, labor cost, just everything that is kind of come from COVID, and all of the pent-up issues that they had there are now coming to the head. And so you look at hospital systems as the end, like, if you follow the org chart up from who's paying your rent, you go to the hospital systems. If they're struggling, how does healthcare real estate still make sense? Even though the demand is there, if the payers are struggling, if they're potentially going to struggle to pay their rent, which has never happened really, how do you underwrite that?
Yeah, I think it's understanding the business, right? If you want to be a healthcare real estate investor, it's not like investing in any other piece of real estate. Right? It's not like underwriting an office tenant or an office building in a downtown metro or a core district, central business district, which, by the way, is probably the most challenged sector of real estate right now. It's not underwriting retail and a Five Guys or a Chick-fil-A that's got cars out the line all the way out, right? Healthcare real estate is really about underwriting that user of that space, and I always say it's operator first. So why do I want that health system if they're struggling? I want them because they're going to continue to provide healthcare. There's going to be that need, that demand. We circle back to what we originally talked about, right? People aren't getting younger. People aren't getting less sick, unfortunately, as they age. And so as we think about that, it's a real positive for that growth side and for that demand side and for that need side. And I think that hospitals have notoriously not been the best and most efficiently operated businesses. I remember 20 years ago working on a project, one of my first projects, and talking to a hospital and health system, it was a health system actually, and saying, hey, you realize you own this piece of real estate? And they said, no, we own the one next door. I said, no, you actually own that one. You did a swap a year and a half ago. They just don't pay attention. Yeah. Real estate's not important to them.
Do you have it in writing? Yeah, we have like 1 million documents.
Yeah. Look, I pulled them from the county as well. So I think the hospitals, that's not their focus, is the real estate, right? Their focus is on providing that care. I think they haven't been the best business operating people in the past. I think that's why you've seen private equity come in. That's why we made a shift into hospitals. We acquired a health system. We bought Ardent Health, and I think it was 2014 or 2015, we bought the entire system. And so we took that whole system and we did a PropCo split. So we own all the real estate. And then we took the operating side of the business. We kept 10% of that operating business. We gave 30% to the senior leadership of that operating business, and we sold the other 60%. Great win.
Private equity?
To private equity. Yeah, private equity. They're doing a great job growing that business. We don't do that. We're not in that operating business. We understand it.
But you bought the OpCo to get to the RealCo.
Bought the OpCo to get to the PropCo.
got to write that down. That's a good idea.
So, I mean, we've done that before in other sectors. I mean, we'll continue to do that. We look for operators and partners that we can grow with. We've done that in seniors housing a handful of times as well. So, but to circle back to your question, yeah, it's a concern for sure. But I think that overall demand is still there.
You're also not buying hospital systems that are rural necessarily, or critical access hospitals, or de novo kind of for-profit necessarily.
No.
You have some for-profit in your portfolio, but the not-for-profits, you're right, they're always going to provide healthcare. They're mission-based. They aren't in it to necessarily make money. Certainly they want to have money so they can do different things and provide more service and handle population health a lot better. But you were kind of touching on something, I think, or getting to something where your portfolio, and certainly we think our portfolio, is centered around or rooted in hospital system relationships, but that also a specialty or subspecialties that are going to be there that are needed. So radiology, not something we really think highly of, because you can outsource reading x-rays to Israel and have them send back their response in a nanosecond, or AI is going to take that over, who knows. But there's a specialty like orthopedics or cardiology where you have to go in, or cancer treatment, on oncology. I mean, those are things that you cannot do for telemedicine. They're not things that you can outsource to other countries. Those are things that you need space, and they're going to pay the rent, and they're also high income producers for the hospital systems too. And so if they're driving revenue in a good way, then they're certainly going to continue to have those facilities.
Absolutely. That's absolutely what we're focused on. That's why I say operator first. What is the synergy? And so when we look at underwriting a building from the medical office standpoint, it's really looking at what hospital is there, what's their status, like what's their market share, where are they sitting in that market? Are they number one, number two? Do they have the market share they need? Are they going to control that market? And as you know, as you get into the granular detail, you really got to understand what the specialty is, who those physicians are, how those physicians are aligned with that hospital or not. Are they employed? Are they not employed? Are they going to refer their physicians or their patients somewhere else? I always say that owning healthcare real estate is like a three-legged stool. You need the hospital to be there to drive the healthcare delivery. You need the physicians to be there to actually see the patients. And if you're going to be a healthcare real estate owner, you need those two other components. We've got the capital to own the real estate, to put the capital into the buildings, to keep them up to date, keep the tenants happy, keep the patients happy. And without one of those three stools, it doesn't work. If you don't have a hospital and you just have a bunch of physicians, at some point they're going to retire and go away, most likely, or they're going to potentially say, I'm going to go build my own building because they want to make money. Mm-hmm. And that's great. Healthcare real estate there's money to be made, but that's why we align ourselves with the hospitals so we can help advance their mission, advance their goals in the markets that they serve.
So, talking about real estate well, let's go back to capital actually, before I get into the next question about real estate with hospital systems. So capital seems to be a concern for hospitals systems right now. Their days cash on hand are down. They're paying their nurses more. They're potentially paying their doctors more. Everything costs more. Inflation. We have capital. You have capital. We have capital. Hospital systems own 85% of the medical office buildings out there. So, two schools of thought. One, sell your real estate, monetize it, do a sale leaseback, free up a ton of money like tomorrow. You'd have a line out the door of investors like us that want to buy it. The other aspect is use our capital to expand. And so hub and spoke model. You've got the campus. You want to keep people away from the campus unless it's super high acuity or they need to be in a hospital bed. You want them off campus. You want them in ambulatory facilities. You want ASCs. You want MOBs. But you want all of that off because you make more money. And so hospitals are notoriously difficult to deal with. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of people that have to make a decision. You've got a board. You've got everybody that has a different decision. Everybody could be on the same page. Then one person wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, and guess what? Your 3-year project is now back to square one. So how do they get out of their own way? And how do they get to viewing us as a real benefit to them?
Yeah. And I think, in the 20 years I've been in this space, it's a cycle. And usually these hard times, capital markets hard times, is when hospitals realize that, oh, wow, maybe I don't have endless capital. I think hospitals tend to think of their weighted average cost of capital as their cost of debt. I mean, I'm not that smart. You're smarter than I am, probably. You can do a weighted average cost of capital calculation, right? It's some portion of equity, some portion of debt, the weighted average cost of those two. So it's not 100% debt. There's a finite amount of debt that you can take on as a system before you run into issues where you're going to get a downgrade in your credit rating. So you have to think about your equity. I think that's a piece that a lot of hospital CFOs, as I've spoken to them over the years, they haven't really thought about it that way. And I think there's more progressive. There's certain systems that think that way, certain systems that don't think that way. And I think you see the systems that think that way more progressively tend to have better underlying cash flow in their operating systems. They can capture more market share. That's ultimately what they're trying to do, is capture more patients. And they grow that business that way, and understanding that I don't need to own that real estate. And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that hotel you stay at, that Marriott or that Westin or Hilton or whatever, that's not owned by Marriott, Westin, Hilton, whomever. It's somebody like you and I that are real estate investors. We own that real estate because Marriott and Hilton know what they provide is a brand, an identity, a feeling for that hospital. I'm sorry, for that hotel stay.
Right.
Same thing for Walgreens, Sam's Club, any of those retail centers. They don't own that real estate. They don't want to have their money their capital tied up in that. Even when you look at IBM, right, they'll monetize all their real estate. Big corporations get that out, to your point exactly, so they can expand their market share and capture real revenue generation. So great. We make I don't know where we're currently paying for our dividend. It's probably 3, 4, 5%, somewhere around there. I should probably know that. But that's not a huge return. But our investors want that kind of return, steady Eddie income. That's all they're looking for. And I'm not looking to monetize my real estate in the same way that MedCraft and your group is, which is not bad. It's just a different investor profile. You're adding value in a lot of different ways in the access that you provide to build new facilities, to renovate facilities. I'm looking for long-term investments that I can hold, partner with my health system, and provide a steady shareholder return for my stakeholders and grow that dividend over time. And so I think that's what we provide as healthcare real estate owners.
Talk to me about, let's back up a little bit just to give the folks a little idea. We talked a little structure there on hospital systems and their real estate, but talk to us about how you guys raise capital, how you buy deals, what you really look for, and then, some of the headwinds right now with interest rates and sensitivity to that, and how you're making a go of it.
Yeah. So as a publicly traded REIT, we typically think about our capital stack as, we want to have as little debt as we can. Like to be in that 30 to 40% debt range, and then 67% equity. And so when we think about equity, it's issuing new shares into the market. So we can do that a couple of ways. We can announce that we're going to sell a bunch of shares and have a big offering and sell shares into the market, or we can do something which is called an ATM program. And so what we do is we actually issue shares into the market on a daily basis. As we feel that the stock price is at a good spot, we'll sell some shares into the market. So if you, Michael, are looking to buy some Ventas stock, you don't know if you're buying Ventas stock from me that I'm selling, or Ventas stock from Joe down the street that's selling, or if we're issuing new shares as Ventas into the market. And there's some real benefits to that. It helps reduce the dilution of those shares going into the market. And if you have a rising tide, it doesn't hurt the shareholder as well. So it's really beneficial for everybody. That's how we raise our equity. Our debt is typically not secured debt, meaning that we're not borrowing money on one piece of real estate, which I think you're probably looking at getting a loan for one piece of real estate. We're going to issue bond debt. So just like Apple issues bonds or Tesla issues bonds or somebody like that, we're doing the same thing. We're investment grade rated company. So when we go to issue our bonds, we go out to the market, make an announcement, sell those bonds, sell off pretty quickly. As with most things, you already know the answer. You already know the outcome before you go. So we know where they're going to trade before they go out.
It's not a hope and a prayer.
It's not a hope and a prayer. And then the other unique thing that we've done is we've created a core fund vehicle. So we have a perpetual life fund vehicle that we created in 2020 that we announced. It's actually part of the reason I came back to Ventas in 2019. We've raised capital from institutional investors around the country and internationally as well. We don't actually divulge who they are. Some of those names are out there, but Ventas is 20% of that capital, and the other 80% is raised by other investors, institutional investors. So we take that core fund vehicle and we go buy individual assets. We've done quite a few, several $1 billion in that fund vehicle, and we continue to look to grow that. We bought a little small MOB late last year, in that fund vehicle. And so in that fund vehicle, we will put individual securitized debt on an asset, but we'll do it at a 40% lever.
Yep.
Whereas I think a typical investor is usually looking to do 60 to 75%, somewhere in there. Leverage is good for them. My investors and my partners aren't actually looking for that big pop. They just want steady cash flow, similar to what we provide in the REIT, in our traditional Ventas REIT.
Before we ask the next question, I think we're both ready for number 2.
Are we doing?
We're all taking Ubers, so
I think we'll do an amber ale.
Oh, okay.
We'll switch it up. A little 90 shilling, little Colorado beer for you.
My wedding ring, serving its purpose.
It always does.
All right. So let's talk a little bit. You touched on it briefly in your quick recap of the bio. Life science, medical office buildings, senior housing, behavioral health, you said. So behavioral health seems to me to be one of the missing links in the continuum right now of care. So you've got a lot of issues from COVID with mental health, substance abuse,
we're facing
geriatric.
We're facing it here in Denver.
Yeah.
Mental health, it's not a homelessness crisis. It's a mental health crisis.
And, we've looked at behavioral health. There's a lot of de novo new operators out there. There's not a lot of credit. There's some hospital buy-in, but it's kind of like on the fringe. Everybody, I think, that is on our side, the investor side of things, looks at that and goes, well, where are reimbursements going to go? Are they going to disappear? Because then my building and my rent is going to disappear. And so how does that come into the day-to-day conversation? Because it seems to me like it is a very, very needed part of the continuum, and hospital systems are kind of begging for it because they're dealing with ER overflow, and then where do we put patients, and shuffling beds, and long-term acute care versus transitional care, shuffling people out of there, or there's a lot of issues with it if they don't have somebody to send to a behavioral health or mental health or substance abuse facility. And so what's your take on it? Where do you see the opportunity? Without giving away all your trade secrets, but give us a little 30,000 foot view from your perspective.
Yeah, I think one thing that you are fully aware of is my wife is an ER doctor, or she was.
By the way, I have to interject here. So Shane has been dating his wife for I don't know how
13 plus
some years. And was never going to get married. Gave me a litany of reasons why they weren't going to get married, all economic for the most part. And then I get a Christmas card from him, and I save all my Christmas cards that I get from everybody. I have a box full of them.
Which is fascinating, by the way. When I heard this a couple of weeks ago, I was blown away.
Yes, I think it's years and years of them. And so I'm reading through it, and I start to look at the small print, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was like we got married or something like that. And I was like, what a genius way to send out your wedding announcement. One, I didn't have to get him a present.
That's correct.
We don't
want any presents.
2, it was just really cool. So congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the trick is I think we had 4 photos on the back. We had one of us on the top, and then we had a picture of us in front of the Eiffel Tower. We had a picture of our rings. Then we had a picture of us kissing under the Eiffel Tower. And so you kind of had to put it together. The best part about this is lots of our friends didn't even catch it. So you called me and then you sent me a video, which was pretty great. So,
well, congrats on that.
So anyways, back to behavioral health care. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think taking a step back to when we were talking about, the pressures on hospitals and health systems, COVID really changed a lot of things. My wife had always kind of planned to step away at this point in her career, but she was thinking she was going to stick around a little longer. COVID really accelerated that for her. A good friend of mine's a critical care pulmonologist. That it was trying for him, and it was funny how it became a political thing, and how the number of times that the physicians would hear, "You're just hiding this. This isn't real." My friend Madison would be talking to a family member and they'd be like, "It's not COVID. That's not a real thing." And he's like, "I'm telling you, they're dying right now because of this. And we're doing everything we can." So that really took a big toll on a lot of the healthcare workers. People lost their sense of respect in a lot of ways, and it's unfortunate. And it caused a lot of pressure on hospitals and physicians. And it also caused a lot of problems for behavioral health care as well, right? It took a big stress for a lot of people to be home and not interact for a year. Yeah. People that were fortunate enough to be able to get out or go to places where they could be outside during that period was a lot better, but not everybody had that opportunity, that chance. So I do agree behavioral health care is very important. I think the behavioral health care market, historically, the challenge has been reimbursement.
Yep.
I've looked at that a handful of times in my career. Each time we considered it, reimbursements were there, and then reimbursements would go away. And I really think the Affordable Care Act that's in place now, that came into place, really makes that difference and solidifies that to stick around, and that reimbursement is going to be there for the long term. I think it's interesting that the Affordable Care Act has been politicized and talked about how it's whatever, what's good and bad about it. But I think what we've learned, that when the last president was in power and the Republicans had control of the House and the Senate, they could change that. And when they started talking to their constituents, people actually wanted to have access to primary care, that you can go see a doctor once a year.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't remember this, but when you were, prior to the Affordable Care Act, if you got pregnant and you didn't have the right insurance, that was a pre-existing condition and it wasn't covered by your insurance. Behavioral health care was added. You couldn't max out on how much money could be spent to save your life.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't have your insurance taken away from you. You can't have your insurance taken away from you anymore. Before, you couldn't even be insured. Everyone gets the opportunity to be insured. Now, there's a greater debate in that, who deserves and what healthcare means to everybody. But at this point, the great news is behavioral health, there's a need and there's reimbursement. So that's wonderful. The challenge on behavioral health is when you say behavioral health, it means a lot of different things. It's not as simple as a medical office building or a seniors housing facility.
Right.
You know what those are. Defining what behavioral health care is a little unknown.
Right.
We've done some deals with Eating Recovery Centers, who's located here in Colorado, ERC.
Deal I tried to buy and you
overbid
for it. Yep.
Snuck in and took it. We continue to talk to them about ways to grow their portfolio. We really like what they're providing for care. We think they have a great model.
But that's not reimbursement based.
It is reimbursed.
Oh, I thought it was private pay.
It is private pay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But it's commercial. It's insurance.
Okay.
It's the majority of their business is insurance reimbursed care. So not a lot of government reimbursement. And there's a need for that. And the mental health side and the drug and alcohol piece is really understanding how to provide that care the right way. The challenge for us as real estate investors is there's two big operators of those facilities, and they like to own their own real estate. One's they're both publicly traded companies, Acadia and UHS.
Yep.
And so what happens is these new organizations form. When they get to a certain size, Acadia comes in, buys the operations on the real estate. So it's hard to really unlock that value. And to your point, hospitals would love to find a way to kind of shift that delivery of care. And there's an operator out there right now, Kindred, which has been renamed. I always forget the name of it.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. They're now starting to get into the behavioral health business, and they're doing similar to what they did in the IRF business, independent rehab hospital business, where they're partnering with hospitals, taking that burden out of the hospital setting, providing a better environment to treat those patients and have a better outcome.
Well, I mean, behavioral, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it is multifaceted. So it's psychiatric care.
Yeah.
It's emergency psychiatric care. It's geriatric psychiatric care. It's adolescent psychiatric care. It's substance abuse. It's, a lot of different things, right? Probably three other ones that I'm not really thinking about right now. And then, so you've got to have, and then it's overnight stays, right? And there's
long-term stays, short-term stays.
Yes. And so there's just, it's a very complicated issue. It's needed. How they're going to figure it out, they will. I don't know when or where, but they will figure it out. The other issue that they're facing too is NIMBY, right? It's like nobody really wants to have one of those facilities. Everybody says I really like it, but nobody really wants it. In their backyard. And so there's a lot of challenges there. But as real estate investors and developers, we're always looking for ways to get ahead of the curve or to find that next big thing, right? Montecito, I'll give them credit. They were buying physician buildings years and years ago when everybody was just, I want camp on campus or maybe just off campus, like next to campus. They were like, screw it. We'll go in the middle of Indianapolis and there's not a hospital within 3 miles and it's a big physician group. We're going to buy that building. And they've done a great job at it. And now everybody's kind of doing that, right? Because we're trying to figure out how to get yield and how to get product.
Well, it's amazing. You bring up a great point. I would have never looked at, and most big investors would have never looked at a deal less than $15-25 million. And if you went below that threshold, you would get a little increase in the yield, right? So back in the day, if you're buying something at $25 million, it's 6.5. And if you were buying a small $10 million deal, you might pay a 7.25. So you got a little bit of a 50 to 75 basis point spread. And there was an aggregation strategy to create value. The number of deals I see that are $8 million, which is not something I typically chase unless it's the right fit with the right partner for me, they're pricing the exact same way as a big deal.
There's a whole subset of investors, which I know you know this, that have in their pitch, they say, we're not competing with the REITs. We're buying everything the REITs won't buy. Right. And so it's that $5 to $15 million deal.
Yep.
But now, of course, if it makes sense, you'll do it.
Yeah. No, and I think it's also the size you are dictates kind of what you should be chasing and how you should be chasing it and how you want to grow. I think we can be a lot more focused on where we want to grow. We don't have to grow for the sake of growing. We want to do smart growth, which as an investor is what I would want to hear. That you're not just buying stuff because you want to buy stuff. There's plenty of examples where that doesn't work. There's plenty of examples where it has worked in the past. And I think
because you look at every deal and they're like, this is a lifetime hold, whether it's not going to be or not, that's to be determined. But every deal that you buy, you go, this is going in our portfolio. This is going to contribute to our, FF&O. And we got to own this long term. We got to look at this as, a 20-year hold.
Exactly. And that's why it's operator first. How can I help them grow? How can I help them do their job better and provide care in the market better? That's how I think about our investing. And when we look at portfolios, that's what I'm looking for. How does this nest into our existing portfolio?
Yep. So you have a little bit of experience, and maybe not directly, but with our hospital system, challenges that they're facing. But this is something I try and ask with hopefully a series of these podcasts that we do, kind of centered around some of the same questions, like what's working in healthcare right now and maybe what's not working. I had a physician on last week. He's a surgeon, and he had some really good insights as to what he thought was working and wasn't working. Just, you and I are just real estate guys. So we're probably the lowest rung on the
we are 100% the lowest rung in healthcare.
But we have eyes and, we've had our own experiences, and your wife is a physician. And so what do you think?
I would say what's working is the Affordable Care Act. I think that's been phenomenal to allow people to have access to healthcare. That's been huge to be able to have a child, to get pregnant and not get dinged with a pre-existing condition. And there's young people don't even remember that. They're like, what do you mean there's a pre-existing condition? How can pre-existing condition? I just, we're pregnant now. But those little nuances in that bill really helped the delivery of healthcare in this country and really brought light to the mental health care crisis that we have and give it an opportunity to fix it.
Yep. Now,
fixing the mental health care crisis is a totally different thing. And I'm not smart enough to tell you how to do that. I will say our partner ERC has started to do some things in the mood behavioral side. They have a side business where they've got kind of on the eating recovery side, they figured out kind of how to fix that problem. They're trying to figure out how to do that with other mood-based behaviors. So it's pretty exciting what they're doing. So I think that's pretty fascinating, pretty interesting. From a hospital standpoint, I think what's going well is hospital systems continue to consolidate. I think there's probably an oversupply of beds, although you can argue that COVID proved that we didn't have enough beds, but that wasn't something that shocked the system. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. The evolution to ambulatory care and to more outpatient care is only more beneficial for us as users of healthcare. And I think we have to become consumers of healthcare more so than users. I think back in the day when you and I first had our health insurance, it was $25. You went to the ER, right? Now it's $250. So do I really want to go to the ER?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably good. It makes us really realize what it is. I think that healthcare is a commodity in a lot of ways. It is what it is, but we should have some decision on where I want to spend the money and more access or more understanding of what things cost and why they cost that way. Do I want to get my ACL done over here, over there? Physicians, I'm not cutting on physicians, but they're out to make a profit. So if they're not affiliated with a hospital or health system, they may push you to one facility versus another because they get better reimbursements.
Right.
And, you talk about we didn't talk about this, but, the reimbursements of in-network versus out of network, that was a big deal back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And people went out of business because they try to do the out-of-network model. We have a personal friend. Entire hospital system.
Yeah.
We have a personal friend who's an orthopedic spine surgeon that was doing that. And the health insurance company said, hey, if you do out-of-network, we're not going to pay you. Sue us. And so that kind of solved itself. So I'm encouraged by that hospitals do have control of that. I think it is a good thing. I think this difficult time for hospitals can only make them be better business operators. The supply chain issues were huge for PPE. They were huge for getting certain drugs, for really providing that care. The challenge that the hospitals have faced is they've increased labor costs. They were losing nurses to traveling nurses. If you were a nurse working full-time, making $70,000 a year, somebody came along and said, hey, if you want to move around, we'll pay you 3 times that amount.
Right. And then guess what happened to the nurses that didn't travel, where the traveling nurse came in and was like, oh, I'll take you to lunch today because I'm making 3 times.
I'm making 3 times.
Guess what? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's changed too, because that traveling nurse doesn't get a contract anymore. That 30-day contract that they thought would go in perpetuity ended.
Yep.
And so there was real correction. But the problem was the hospitals said, we got to raise our wages. So they did, thinking that they would then scale wages back.
We got to raise your wages. But, the physician I had on last week, he's saying his reimbursements have gone down almost every single year.
Yeah.
And so, that's a whole nother can of worms. But he's like, I think 50% of my income in the next couple of years is going to come from non-hospital related ventures, like
Absolutely.
investments and real estate and creating a new widget for a knee implant or something along those lines, which is great because it's spurring new innovation. But hospitals are in a really precarious situation because they've got a 250,000 nurse deficiency right now. 250,000 nurse positions have gone unfilled in the U.S. Physicians are getting older. Physicians that are coming out of college, that's actually probably good for hospital systems because they don't want those people don't want to take on debt, and so they'll just work for a system. But everything is cyclical in this business, from a employed physician to an independent physician, and they were employed, now they're independent, and then they get sick of being independent because they're fighting with all the new coding, and then they say, screw it, we've got to hire 10 people to do our codes just to get paid, and then we don't get paid nearly as much as we should, so let's go back and work. Private equity has come in the mix. Which leads me to my next question about private equity, which not so much on the hospital side of things, although you dealt with it with Ardent, but physician groups. And so, I don't know if you have a take on it, but it seems to be pervasive in our business that private equity is just everywhere. I call a lot of physicians to buy their buildings. They probably get 5 calls from real estate guys a week. They probably get 30 calls from private equity guys.
Yeah. My wife's group was bought by a private equity group. That private equity group then sold it and took on a bunch of debt. And those physicians didn't even understand what just happened.
Nope.
They agreed to it. First time around wasn't such a bad deal. Second time around was a terrible deal. So we sold our shares. We sold our shares. We fought tooth and nail to sell those shares just because, private equity is in there to make money. I think private equity is good. It can spur some change. It can spur better business to be run better, to be more efficient in the way they do it. But at the end of the day, you're providing care. It's not a widget business, right? You can have the same issue with 2 different patients, but it's 2 different procedures, 2 different ways of handling that problem. It's not like stamping out a hood on a car. That's the same hood every single time. That's what private equity wants. They want efficiency. That's not the way delivery of healthcare works, unfortunately. I don't actually think it's all that great. Now, Ardent is private equity backed, but I think it's a little different. They are looking to provide better care. They're growing their ambulatory strategy much more than they have. They've really been kind of focused on the main hospital, and they're looking at growing that ambulatory strategy. And I think that's where you should go, as we talked about earlier. If I'm a hospital system, and I'm not smart enough to run a hospital, but that's where I'd be looking to go. I'd really be looking at, how do I get HOPD on every off-campus site? Yeah. What do I have to pay? How can I do it to get those reimbursements up? I'm kind of so-so on private equity, to be quite honest. I'll probably get chastised for that statement, but there's good pieces to it. I think there's some bad pieces too. In the long run, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. I like the prospects of it because for us as developers, especially with an ASC program where we can go in and build a surgery center kind of turnkey for physician groups, especially cardiology, which seems to be a big push right now. I guess there's some new reimbursement changes that have made cardiology a lot more attractive to private equity. But private equity model coming in, scaling down employees, really cutting, getting down to bare bones, growing through sheer force of will and acquisition, maybe doesn't work here because you're already in bare bones from a employee perspective. People are already pissed off. Like you're not going to that model isn't going to work. And I don't profess to be an expert in what they're underwriting or how they're looking at things, but I do like the aspect of giving doctors some liquidity and maybe letting them invest back into it. And if the private equity group is really about let's get scale, let's really be able to fight with the insurance companies to get better insurance rates, and we can pay our people more. The business of healthcare is really a business of that is directly marketed to consumers, right? It is not this automatic where just because you get sick, you go to the hospital down the street. People do have a choice. They do tend to.
Well, now your insurance will dictate what your choice is too.
Well, they will dictate what your choice is, but I feel like there's a lot of research that goes into who you're going to go see if you have a choice. Or
I think that's our generation. I think our parents don't do that.
They just went.
They just go, and they still to this day do that. I mean, I think the number of times that I've talked to my parents or my in-laws and said, "Did you ask this question?" Well, no, the doctor didn't say that. They just think that the doctor's going to take care of them.
Yeah.
And like our generation and maybe even the younger generation is more like, well, that's great, but like, what do I really need? Let me really understand. Let me talk to a buddy, talk to a friend, like we do that a little more.
And I mean, you look at Yelp reviews and I've talked to hospital CEOs where they're concerned about Yelp reviews.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like when you look at private equity, if you think you're just going to go in and aggregate and then sell and make money, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but the business of healthcare is taking care of patients, as you said, and providing that healthcare and really being good at what you do.
Yep.
Not just slam it all together and then sell to the next.
The challenge is if you're going to be a private equity shop, most times you're going to do an LB. You're going for leverage, right? You're going to buy something at a 2-time, 4-time multiple. You're going to get that, aggregate it. You're going to get enough cash flow, top line cash flow, that you can then go to a bank and go raise debt. And you're going to lever the crap out of that
LBO.
thing. Yeah. You're going to lever it up. And then you're going to go, not my problem, when you go sell it or you go public and you sell it at 12 times. And now, we can't make those debt payments. And then we're going to BK at some point, potentially. Not saying that happens every time, but that does occur at times with private equity. And then what happens when that happens, when you have a bunch of physicians that are staffing all the ERs, that are staffing all the radiology, staffing all the pick your specialty that they've acquired over the time. And now they're bankrupt. They don't exist. They just fired everybody, or they didn't fire everybody, but every doctor was like, I'm not getting paid. I didn't get my paycheck. Now what am I going to do? They're not going to show up if they're not getting paid. Now you got a real health crisis.
Well, as far as getting a little into the weeds on the underwriting for us real estate folks, when we look at a building and it's an orthopedic group and they're independent, and they're not big enough to be a category killer, but they're, big, still big.
Yep.
They're a target for private equity,
Absolutely.
Especially if you look at some of the ages of the doctors. I mean, we're getting kind of deep into that, and we're like, well, this is a great group now, but what are they going to be when they get bought by private equity?
Yeah.
And so that changes things, right?
And it circles back to something you said earlier, which is I think you were going towards this, the generational shift of the way doctors want to provide care. You talk to somebody that's 60 years old, they were a mom and pop provider. Somebody that's 50 came up in a group setting. In the 40s, they kind of were in that group setting. Now they're looking at those guys are kind of young and gunning for a big LBO for a buyout, right? The 30-year-olds that are just coming out to provide medicine, which, by the way, they are all 30 because it takes that long to become a doctor. Those physicians want to come out and they want to work 4 days a week. They want to be able to go ski on Friday. Or they want to ski on Monday. Or they want to have 2 days off in the middle or something. They don't want to work.
They want Shane's lifestyle.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I like my lifestyle.
Yeah.
But they they don't want that same thing that the 60-year-old did, which he or she built that business. The 50-year-old, the 40-year-old, they built that business. It's a different level of investment into their career, and they're fine making, they all think, I mean, everybody at 20 and 30, we all thought this, you and I both, we're all worth $1 million at that point. We're not, but we all think we're worth $1 million at that point. And they just want to clip their coupon, do their shifts, and go home.
Right.
Doesn't
but then they
fit.
get older.
Exactly. And then they're looking
that's
for.
what I was talking about, the cycle of employed versus independent versus
totally.
employed versus independent.
And we've seen that in the 20 years I've been in. And it comes to reimbursements, how they get reimbursed. And you talk about the cardiology component. I remember when infusion centers were, this is probably the 2005, 2006 timeframe where cancer infusion was owned by hospitals. And then there was some reimbursement shift that every physician was now starting an infusion center. 4 years later, every hospital was buying those things up because the reimbursement went away. So CMS always does a good job. Not always, lots of time, figures out where the fat is and trims that fat.
Well, this has been great. I'm going to be cautious every time because I know you're getting taken out to a dinner tonight.
I hope so. Not by you.
Not by me. Summarizing, healthcare real estate, great place to be in. For those that are in healthcare real estate listening to this, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Stickiness of the tenant, the fact that it's mission-based for most of the providers. They're there to provide healthcare. They want to provide healthcare. It's also competitive, and they've got issues that they're facing right now. But if you can kind of zoom out from 30,000 feet, the challenges that they're facing are real, but they're going to get through them. And healthcare real estate is really a good place to be if you're investing in a publicly traded company like yourself, or a REIT like Ventas, where you want a dividend and you got great asset-backed, basically securities. Or MedCraft, where we're developing and acquiring assets. I mean, medical office seems to be bubbling to the surface. And then, when I got into business, it was, I think, $4 billion, maybe $5 billion in transactions.
2012?
2010, I think I really got into it. And now there's 25 billion in transactions last year. I mean, that's a huge jump.
Little skewed with the public market deal. But
correct.
Still,
right.
Still a big
but
amount.
There's always one of those big deals every year that kind of skews it. And I mean, that's a 5X from when I started. And so we don't really even have that many institutional investors outside of funds. We have a couple groups like KKR that came in last year and did a recap. Blackstone's not really in the space.
Hasn't done it yet.
Way. Carlyle's in a very big way. JP Morgan's or Morgan Stanley, is in a bigger way. But there's a whole host of private equity groups and aggregators that are not in our space yet. And when that happens,
we'll
see.
And I think it's interesting. We talked about office buildings.
Well, I'm glad you brought up office buildings.
Well, because
carry on with your thought, but I have a question for you.
Look, to your point too. When I started in 2001 in healthcare real estate, I remember a portfolio transacted, and it went for I was like a 9.5 cap. I was so young, I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't understand why everybody was freaking out. It's the first time something went sub double digit. How could anybody make that work? And it was a deal that my current partner PMB bought way back in the day. Health system was monetizing the real estate. And I was at Hammond's company, and all the older guys were like, how does this work? They can't work. It's crazy.
PMB overpaying for deals since 2001.
They don't even buy stuff. So, that was interesting to see that. And then you watch the evolution in 2004, 2005. I started doing acquisitions. And I think back to that time, it was a 10 cap when I started. It was probably a 7.5, 8 cap is where I was buying things in 2004, 2005. Public money had just started. Ventas had bought a few assets. NHP, the REIT I was with, had bought a few assets. That's why they brought me in 2008 to do it directly. And then 2008 happened, right? And what happened, I just told the story. I was getting my first bonus, and the guy called me up and he said, hey, we're going to do this, this, this. And he goes, you're quiet. What's going on? I said, I can't believe you're not firing me. It's 2008. It's 2009. It's early 2009. I'm like, the world is done. Yeah, exactly. Twiddling my thumbs going, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
Sitting at home, working from home in a mushroom, being fed shit, kept in the dark, not knowing what's going on. He goes, we're going to pay your full bonus. I'm like, I was getting fired. He goes, no. He's like, we've paid our dividend. All of our tenants are paying. Everything is good in the company. The capital markets are a different story. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to do what we need to do. And then we saw Harrison Street enter. We saw some other bigger names enter into the space. That grew it through 14, 15. And we saw some more. And Remedy started recapping their real estate. That really brought new investors in. And now with 2020 COVID, we saw more capital come in. And now I think with the evolution of office buildings being struggling, we've now seen some pretty big defaults on some pretty big assets here recently that have just been announced. That's going to shift those investors that were doing office. Medical office is now a real sector, which is part of office in a lot of those funds. That money's going to shift over somewhere. It's going to come here. And I'm never one to say I hate cap rate compression because it's happened my entire career. But there's more capital that's going to come into our space. And there's a lot of buyers that aren't going to understand what they're buying or what's good and bad about it. And that's okay. I'm not a buyer of that stuff. I'm happy to lose deals. I just said this today in another meeting. In my career, 20 years of buying real estate and acquired billions of dollars of real estate, the best deals I've done are the ones I haven't done.
My thesis, we're raising fund 2 right now. We're talking to institutional investors. And one of the questions is, what's the exit strategy? And I said, well, there's a lot of investors that are getting into the space now. They're starting to learn about it. They're not in it yet, but they're going to be. And this happened with the groups that are, I won't mention names, but there's a couple private equity groups that are in our space in a big way now, but it took them 3-4 years of learning it to get in the space. I think that learning curve will be expedited with some of these newer groups because of what you said about them coming out of office and needing to put it into something. And while it's office with just the word medical in front of it. Now, they may make some mistakes. I hope they go with operators like ourselves or you, people that know what they're doing and groups that know what they're doing. But I said, listen, when we go to recap this portfolio, there's a whole host of people that are the usual suspects that are in it right now, but there'll be 10, 15 other groups ready to recap our portfolio by the time we go out and take this. So can I bank on that? Is that anecdotal? Yes, but that is the trend that has happened over the last few years. And I think that if you really look at the macro and the micro, that's a very easy to defend thesis.
I don't disagree. I just fought for a deal recently in my investment committee where we were humming about the yield. Too tight, not worth it. And I said, look, if we've learned anything about medical, it was a medical office deal. If we learned anything about medical office, that ACL still needs to be repaired. So as long as we can raise the capital today and not be dilutive on what we're doing, and we make money on it, we should buy. Is it tiny? Is it a tighter spread? Maybe. But is it a good long-term investment with a health system for 15 years and good growth? And on a campus that's a booming campus where we have opportunities to buy more buildings, we should take that risk. And we did. I'm glad our group decided to do it. It was the right deal to do. And I think it'll turn out to be really good because it's not going anywhere. Back to the start of this thing, healthcare, delivery of healthcare is not going anywhere, unfortunately. We're all getting older and we're all going to need more care. You and I especially.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother wormhole that we can go down. It's certainly the silver tsunami and the folks that are getting older, but just healthcare and being healthy in America.
Yeah.
And how do we do a paradigm shift on that? Maybe the younger generations are healthier and maybe they are, not eating out at fast food restaurants. But, I did a 9-month tour around the U.S. During COVID. And I drove, I don't know how many miles, thousands of miles, but every single exit had every single fast food restaurant and almost no health, not even worth mentioning the number of healthy choices that you have. You really don't have any. And so how do we get away from
geographically focused too, right? I mean, there are definitely different parts of the country.
Sure, if you go to California, you can get a salad.
Yeah.
But outside of California, you're like,
listen,
you're going to Taco Bell.
I grew up in rural Wisconsin. I grew up basically eating beef every meal, except for maybe one meal out of the week that we didn't have beef. But my father would trade electrical services for a cow. We'd live off of a cow for the year. I mean, truly, we ate beef every night. We had some meat, beef, some potato, and some vegetable. It was never a fresh vegetable. It probably came out of a can 99% of the time, unless it was fresh from the neighbor's garden. But the evolution of me, I look for healthy options, right? I recognize that I try not to eat as much red meat anymore because I know that I'm predisposed to cardiac issues. Finding healthy options. I eat Chipotle a lot. I eat Chipotle a lot. You can get a vegetarian meal. You get vegetables; they're fresh.
Good point system too.
Oh, really?
Oh, you don't.
I'm not signed up. No. Clearly, I'm missing. I eat it.
You're missing out.
I'm missing out.
A free burrito for every 10.
Oh, now, and I'm not even paying. That's the really sad part. I'm always traveling, and Ventas is buying my dinners.
Well, I'm sure Deb Cafaro will love that you're going to Chipotle versus restaurants that I would go to, which are sit-down, super prefix $300 meals for lunch.
I know. I've been with you, and you've always given me the bill, so I always appreciated that.
Well, actually, I want to close with a couple quick thoughts because I think this is interesting to get outsiders' take on different industries. So we mentioned office before and investors getting out of general office or typical suburban and core office, CBD office, and getting into medical potentially. I'll intertwine two thoughts here. So what will happen to general office, in your opinion? Because our downtown is terrible right now. Mm-hmm. I went down there last week for a meeting, and it was a ghost town, and it has been for a long time. And I think there's a lot of other cities that are still coming out of COVID. It's a little bit better than it was, but it's still very depressing. Nobody wants to go downtown, these downtowns anymore. And then two, what's kind of a interesting inverse of that is that I've been looking for, we just have a small office here. It's me, shared office space or, WeWork type space.
Yeah.
Every single one of those is full.
Yeah.
Every mom and pop shared office space is full. Everything is full. And so people are going to the office and people are wanting to get out of the house. They're just not wanting to go downtown.
Yeah.
And they're just not wanting to do that stuff. So what's your opinion on what happens to downtowns and what happens to office buildings? Will people come back, or what is going to happen?
I mean, there's far smarter people than me to answer this question, but I don't think I have an answer. First of all, you should just work out of your house. I know you have 2 small kids, so good luck with that one. But your house is spectacular, so you should just work out of there. I've worked from home since 2008, and it works for some people. It doesn't. Right. I know guys that
it works for a time. It's cyclical. I've had a great time working from home for the last 3 years, but I'm ready to get into an office and be around some people.
Well, and I think that's for me. I've worked from home since 2008, and my releases, I'm on the road basically every week. So I'm meeting people. I'm on the road. So when I get home, it's nice to just get in my office and not have to go somewhere and just get it all done. So when I'm working on a Saturday or a Sunday, I can just get it knocked out and be done and not have to go in somewhere. To answer your question about the office, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think that what is going to drive, I think generational shifts too, right? Younger adults, I shouldn't say kids. Younger adults think that they can, it goes back to everybody's worth $1 million a year. They think that they can just do their job, and doing their job is what gets them paid a bunch of money. But it's not really that. It's about who you know and how you interact with those people. And so in order to get that interaction, you have to go into the office. You have to see people. You have to be in meetings. You have to learn from people. You have to see their style. Zoom calls are great, but there's nothing like actually being in the room together. I think one of the biggest challenges is I talk to my younger people on my team, stop texting, pick up the phone and call. Well, they don't really talk. Make them talk to you. Mm-hmm. Get that connection. It's easy for somebody to say no over a text. It's harder for them to say it over the phone. It's even harder when you're in front of them. And you get more information. Those pauses, it really does make business better. So I think as people get laid off and as the economy has the situation, we're losing jobs in tech, right? That nobody ever thought that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I bet you see more people come into the office. I bet you see more people realize, I don't want to lose my job. Yeah. I'm going to go in. So,
well, Sam Zell said it at the beginning of kind of the shutdown of the office. He said, everybody's going to stay home. That's great. Yep. There's going to be some guys and gals that come into the office that are hungry, and they're going to kick your ass because they're going to get up and they're going to come in. Yep. And he was right about so many things, but he was right about that too.
Yeah, we recently had Ken Griffin come and speak with our company in a private event, and it was pretty spectacular to hear that guy talk.
From Citadel. Yeah.
And he talked about how COVID, what he did is he said, look, we're all coming in. He rented a hotel in Miami, somewhere in Florida. I'm sorry, I don't know if it was Miami, somewhere in Florida, and flew everybody down with their spouses, their kids. Everybody lived in this hotel, and they would show up and work in that hotel. And the families went to school there. They had a beach that was sectioned off that they could just continue to do business in the way that they needed to. And that interaction is so important. And he talked about that quite a bit. So it was pretty fascinating to hear him say that. And back to Sam's point, it's like, you're going to be a winner or you're not. You're going to be aggressive or you're not. And I think that's what you're going to see. Now, does everybody have to come in? I think we've learned, and I think Ventas is an organization where historically we probably thought that everybody needed to be in the same office. I think our management team has realized we got a bunch of really talented individuals. We can all communicate and get our jobs done. So we're actually on a Monday from home, Friday from home, 3 days in the office. And it's amazing when we're in the office, we're all in the office. And it's also amazing on Monday and Friday, we're still working. We're getting stuff done. Yep. So it's not like it's a 4-day weekend, you know. We're really getting things done. And I think it takes the right organization, the right drive to really make that successful. But I do think if we have a bubble, if we have a little bit of a dip here, I think it'll change some things. It'll make people come in. I think there is some component of a hybrid lifestyle going forward from a work-life balance isn't bad. I think that when you have happy employees, you have more productive employees.
Totally. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for
I can't believe you chose me. I can't believe you chose me as number 2. I'm a little upset that I'm even on the list.
Well,
but you know,
I mean, we're just starting. We have
4 choices.
We have 0 followers at this point. So maybe after this podcast, it'll skyrocket to 1.
I doubt it.
Well, good to see you.
Yeah,
thanks for everything.
Good to see you as well. Thanks so much for having me on.
You got it.
All right.
See ya.